Hello, viewers. Welcome to our official second edition of our Fireside Chats in confinement, telechats. We have here joining us Denis, Denis who
Hello.
is in Moscow, and Johan who is in London. And we want to take the opportunity of this international conversation to just explore a bit the differences and the similarities between life in different places and international backgrounds as well.
Yes.
Now, in the news, we've seen that the UK and Russia are countries that are really going up in terms of infections, and confinement has been prolonged in the major cities like Moscow. So I want to start first on a more personal note in terms of what your experience has been living through this, and little by little we can get more into the macro view of what's going on in the world. So Denis, the mayor of Moscow has prolonged the confinement up until the end of the month, and I just wanted to ask you how are you experiencing this living in a in a Russian family, and how do you feel? Just give us some words or.
Yes. Yes, Augustine, yeah, thanks very much for this important question. Indeed, the self-isolation, as Russians call this confinement terminology here, it has been prolonged up to 31st of May, so basically another month. And yeah, so generally, to be honest, I feel fine because, I have been in the confinement more than a month. So I have actually adapted to this lifestyle because, as you would know me, I'm very much outgoing person. So normally I would go outside, I read news in the coffee shops. I like to go to the central Moscow just to have a walk. So normally during the day, I'm always out of my flat, but now I'm forced to be inside my flat. So during the course of this month, and currently I have adapted and still adapting to this lifestyle because, I find so many things I could do, which otherwise I wouldn't have been able to do it if I wasn't in the confinement. Yeah, so, and in terms of like going to the gym, for instance, as you know, I go to gym every day, but now I have been forced to change my exercise routine. So now I normally go jogging and exercising outside of my house. Normally, I'm not allowed to do it technically, but I must confess, I close my eye on this bit. Yeah, because I feel there's nothing wrong if I'm doing it by myself and yeah, close to my house. Yeah, but and in terms of my work, I have been working from home. Yeah, and I find it yeah, fine, and if I need to speak to someone, there are IT tools such as Zoom, WhatsApp, phone calls. Everyone has been in touch. Yeah, so I feel actually fine. Yeah, and I understand it's a necessary measure. And yeah, so I have been pretty much
Okay.
adapted to this, and I read quite a lot. Yes, and final thing, I cherish this moment, confinement, because I have a chance to talk to my friends, relatives, and to reactivate my relationships, which is also very important, including professional ones as well. Yeah.
So yes, it sounds like you are experiencing a similar experience to what other people are going through in other major European cities in terms of how they're using their times and how they're feeling. Um, let's also turn to Johan. So
Mm.
the UK, it's number 4 country in terms of infections.
In the
Uh,
world.
yeah, in the world. And so, how are you taking this in personally? Do you find the do you find it concerning? Do you find the change of events being very uncertain? Or do you take this time as an opportunity, like Denis does, to be able to reactivate friendships and develop hobbies and so forth?
Well, yeah, there's no doubt that I have been spending more time at home, and in doing so, yeah, it provides an opportunity to really do the things that we usually always complained we didn't have time to do. Because in a way, it feels like the rhythm of life has, it is slower because again, you spend more time at home, so it provides that chance to access different resources, read books if that's something you like, but otherwise I personally find myself more in my computer, in my laptop, or in my phone. I think I would say I spend, it would be like 50-50 laptop and mobile. And so, yeah, personally, I've been more in touch. I'm not that quite an extrovert person in terms of going out or planning with friends to go out. However, I like to reach people individually. So in this confinement, I've been reaching people via WhatsApp mainly, individually, just asking how are they doing, how are they, how do they see the situation, and what are they doing in their spare time. Most people, as you know, are either furloughed or working from home. Those that are furloughed, they find themselves, I would say, uh, yeah, bored, uh, and maybe bored at times because eventually you'll find something to do, and whether that's something towards your personal career or just in the house, you know, doing chores or exercising. Which here in the UK there was a statistic: 30% in general, people are exercising more, and which is brilliant, I think, because it's and also with this weather, I think we've been blessed in the UK with the weather because all of April was sunny, and then we had like the first week of May was again to the cold end, 10 degrees, but now we're up again to 20, 22. This weekend has been amazing, and yeah, yesterday, like Dennis said, I've been jogging. Today I was cycling. There's a feel that things are starting to ease. Yesterday was VE Day, and a lot of people here, just by the neighborhood, they set up some tables outside, and they were like literally in groups, already like having uh, a toast and just conversing with each other. Whether they were from the same household or just neighbors, I don't know, but it was good to see. I'm sure some people wouldn't agree with that because that's what I've been hearing in the news. There is people that are just paying attention about what others are doing to then criticize, whereas I see it as a positive because people are not fearful to be outside and just try and carry on with life with some optimism and some good spirit, because that's essentially, I think, can be hard for some people, after having been incarcerated,
Okay,
to put it that
so
way. So.
uh, so both of you are taking this experience positively in the best way that you can. And
Trying to,
Johan, you
yes.
mentioned that some people it's a bit more difficult because they're being furloughed. And I wanted to turn
Mhm.
to Denis. So you described the experience, your own experience, but tell us a little bit about um, other people in Moscow, in Russia, who you've been speaking with that maybe have not been experiencing such a positive confinement. Can you tell us a bit about specific things that people you are talking to are going through? And with the confinement that has been prolonged little by little by the mayor of Moscow, do you find that people that you know in Moscow, are they discouraged by this? And do they feel it's very uncertain? How do you, what's the temperature? How are people reacting?
Yes, well, actually, yes, I spoke to a number of people, and I've met some of them in supermarkets. Like, for instance, I've met my childhood friend, I think last week in the supermarket, and I didn't know, but he used to work. He was prior to this pandemic, he was working in a bakery, and because of this pandemic, he was laid off effectively because of the lack of demand. So basically, yes, that's another example of pandemic affecting people's livelihood, that he was effectively sacked. So, but he wasn't very much depressed. That's the feeling that I got. So basically, he took it in a positive way, and he said, once pandemic is over, he'll try to find another job. Yeah, and I spoke also to my another Russian acquaintance, and she mentioned that she's suffering from the depression actually, and this is true, by the way, because her day-to-day rhythm of life has been interrupted significantly, and she made some plans in advance regarding travel, and she is on her holiday now, so her travel plan has been disrupted as well. So she find it very hard, yeah, to cope with this pandemic. And other than that, most people that I speak to, neighbors, for instance, then they don't feel quite affected. In my opinion, they look cheerful when they go outside, when they walk their dogs, and when I ask them, what do you feel about this confinement, lockdown? Do you think it is a necessary measure, or do you think it shouldn't have been done? And 99% of the feedback that I'm getting is that people largely support these measures, and people agree that pandemic, this COVID-19 is a very dangerous, unprecedented virus. So these lockdown measures are very much necessary ones. And on the final point, whether as the lockdown has been prolonged uh, 2 days ago, and it might be prolonged further on, when I try to have this kind of discussions with people, I don't get much of their opinions actually. I think that's the one of the Russian traits. People don't have a tendency to voice their opinion in an articulate manner. So I think they take things as they are. I think generally they are supportive, and they're willing to follow the latest lockdown measures and guidelines. But on the final point, when I go outside for a little bit, like going to the supermarket, I see many people outside in groups. Like, for instance, I saw today there was some youth, I think 3 of them together sitting in the park, benches, having a laugh, listening to music. And then another day, I saw people walking the dogs, and it's not just one person, it's a couple of them. So I think generally speaking, when people support lockdown measures, they try to adhere to them, but not as strictly as they should be. Yeah, so I might fall into that category because, as I confessed, I try to exercise outside, but by myself and near to my home. Yeah.
Okay, so you're saying that people try to follow the measures. Mostly people agree with them. For some people, they take it positively, like yourself. For others, like your friend, it's a bit more difficult. But under the surface, people might be thinking otherwise, and they might be keeping some thoughts to themselves, as you mentioned. Maybe Johan, do you find that there's a similar kind of reaction among the British and international people you speak with in London and the UK? We hear some news that this is the worst economic crisis in the UK for the last 300 years or something.
Yeah.
So the people that you're speaking with, do you find that they're taking this? Does it have a strong impact on their lives, or are people trying to see the positive side?
Well, I mean, I think the people I'm surrounded with, they are employees just like myself. So as long as they have their job, even if they have furloughed, I don't see any worry that is different, that is causing them to be in panic mode or a bit anxious about things need to go back to normal. Probably if they're to lose a job, then the panic can kick in. On the other hand, I've been listening to the radio to people that are like small to medium business owners, and you can feel that they are terrified because they feel that the lockdown is now going too far. They were saying each day in lockdown represents like 2.5 billion of economic activity that is not there. And yeah, this just is just every day is just putting more pressure on the economic system. The furlough support is not sustainable. They already announced, the Chancellor Rishi Sunak said that this will have to be, I believe, will reduce from 80% to 60% in July. and maybe or banned altogether, or it would be stopped altogether. So imagine what would happen with all the hospitality sector. I think that's the main one, where people that are already on low salaries are being supported by the government, but it's literally thousands, millions of people. And then if they cut that support, it's going to be very difficult. And so yeah, I think it depends. Um, I think in general, I think there's a balance, but I think we are way past it, because so like you mentioned, the crisis is the worst one since 1700s. And yeah, this needs to be, the lockdown has to end, because the sooner it ends, the sooner we can start the road to recovery, which is not going to be overnight, unfortunately, because as we mentioned, we have at the fearful side of people, the people that have a lot of fear, and then the people that are ready to go to work tomorrow in whichever circumstance, that they feel confident that the pandemic is now over and they are healthy and so on, which I think that will be the 20 to 45 age group as well, which is the most productive anyway in terms of the economic, not being discriminatory, but that actually was in the news, that why don't we deploy this age group into the workplace
Yes.
first, to at least start the engines in the economy, And yeah, I don't know. Boris is due to speak tomorrow, and they're talking about five phases to ease the lockdown. So yeah, I'm all over the speech to see what the government group is planning really, immediately. And so yeah, that's
But
my opinion.
but it's interesting because Johan mentioned, sorry for jumping in, just one comment, because Johan mentioned that when this pandemic will end, when the crisis ends, but as we speak right now, it's 9th of May 2020, the pandemic is still going on, there is no vaccine, and COVID-19 is still there. So I think it will be, and as we told, I think last week, doctors, all the professionals are saying that vaccine will not be found in this year. At best, it will be found in the beginning of next year. So I think it's about basically learning how to live through this crisis.
Mhm.
Yeah. So I think all these lockdowns, I think it was just a strategy to buy time for the whole population to adapt and to find a way how we can carry on living, but at time of this crisis. Yeah. So yeah, that's the
Yeah.
comment I wanted to make.
So uh, about this figuring out how to live until there's a vaccine, we've seen major disruptions in terms of events that were supposed to take place. Especially today in Russia. Today is supposed to be the celebratory Victory Day, 9th of May, Soviet Union defeat of Nazi Germany. And so Russia has had to replan this event. So so Denise, as a Russian and as someone who can kind of get a sense of what is the general feeling that Russia has had to recalibrate this very emotional and historically significant event. How how are people taking it in?
I think again, people take, as I said in my previous answer regarding this aspect, Russian people took this particular event as it is. So majority of people didn't criticize, let alone question this measure to postpone the celebration. So instead, I think they resorted to the social medias to basically to post video congratulations to one another. Because what happens is in Russian society, people congratulate one another with the victory day. For instance, like it's the same as I would congratulate Johan, Happy New Year, Happy Birthday. So in this victory day, it's one of the most important events in Russia. So people congratulate one another. So I think what happened was, yeah, people congratulated one another electronically. Yeah, and in terms of the parade celebration, actually it was celebrated, but in a subdued manner. So it was celebrated inside the Kremlin compound. There were regiments marching, and Putin was basically presiding over this mini parade, if you like. But there were no outside spectators, but there were planes flying, sort of, to commemorate this event as well. And I think some people were critical. I think they were critical of that, that there was a plane parade, air parade, instead of a normal one. Yeah, because some people questioned whether that was really a necessary measure. And in Russia also there is a thing called immortal regiment. When people hold, if it was a normal parade, people hold the portraits of their grandfathers, great grandfathers who fought during the war, to demonstrate that they still remember them, and for them they will always be immortalized, those soldiers who fought for their fatherland. So instead, people held the portraits of their ancestors who fought in the war, and they uploaded these videos on the social media, and other people did the same. Yeah, so I think this year it was a unique celebration because people celebrated it online pretty much, I think. But there wasn't any sort of, any implications or repercussions that the parade has been postponed. I think one of the negative implications was that I think maybe partly of this pandemic, I think Putin changed the official date of the celebration of the end of World War. I think he shifted to another date. I can't remember exactly which one it is, but oh yes, it was actually 3rd of September. So I'm not sure whether it has replaced 9th of May, but now the official date of end of the Second World War is the 3rd of September, and many Russian people didn't like it because 3rd of September is the date when there was a terrorist attack in Beslan. Yeah, you would know this. Yeah, so for some people it's a tragedy, and you can't sort of, unify one of the most strategic dates and one of the most glorious days. Yeah, but on the whole, today, as I speak, yeah, people took it positively that the Russian parade has been postponed to another date.
And thank you for that answer to help us understand how Russia is managing the postponement of the Victory Day. On the other side of Europe, in the UK, you also had a pretty historically significant event, and I'm thinking of the speech of the Queen. And this kind of speech you didn't have since the end of World War II. So it's a kind of symbolic. It's a jubilee, so the 75th anniversary, but at the same time, it's symbolic that it's taking place during this crisis. So yeah. Can you tell us a little bit about the symbolism of this speech? And maybe both of you can try and answer this question because both of you are very familiar with UK society.
Yeah, I mean, I think there was a speech not so long ago, which was completely out of it was kind of improvised. I mean, not improvised, but improvised in terms of there hasn't been a speech from the Queen like she did, like out of the agenda kind of thing. And now we have another speech, which is commemorating this VE Day. And yeah, I think this symbolism is, yeah, from the Queen point of view, is to try and bring the nation together, because she was quite using some words there, like we're still a nation. Those brave soldiers, sailors, and airmen would recognize and admire. So, like, empowering the nation. And another quote that, yeah, she is pointing out that, yeah, we are standing strong from our doorsteps. So acknowledging that, yeah, we're still in pandemic mode. We are trying to go through this new era. And yeah, basically she was just being quite, trying to touch the heart of the people, really, and to bring that union, despite the fact we're all at home. She said something like, the streets are empty, but
filled with love.
Yeah, exactly. UK streets not empty as filled with love. So
yeah,
again, I think the symbolism is there in her choice of words, or choice of speech, and to sort of link, what World War II represented, and now what we're going through, try and come out stronger.
Okay.
Yeah,
Yeah,
this,
and
to
one
keep
thing I
it
wanted
warm.
to add as well, remarkably that she spoke yesterday at 9 p.m. And that was the exact time that your father, as we know, George VI, addressed the nation on Victory Day. And she spoke, importantly, how the outlook seemed bleak at the start of the war, but they kept faith, like the British society as a whole, and the outcome was glorious, that, they managed to defeat the Nazis. And I think it was obviously a parallel to the current situation when in the beginning, or to some people now, the situation might not seem bright, but there is a light at the end of the tunnel. And I think what she was trying to say is that we have to hold together and make a little bit of more sacrifice in order to achieve the final objective. And from my knowledge, because I lived in the UK for 7 years, I think a majority, if not all people, they really love the Queen, and they pay attention to every word that she was saying as well. And the final note as well, because I also read a little bit of the Times newspaper, I read that the Duke and the Duchess of Cambridge, that is Prince William and Princess Kate, they hold a video call with war veterans, the Second World War veterans, and they were basically having a nice chat, and they were sharing wartime stories with them. So I think also they play a very important role in upholding the spirit, yeah, within their subjects. Their subjects
There,
being British citizens.
yes, as you say, it sounds like they're doing a lot to hold up the spirits of the subjects, to bring
Yes.
the country together, to use the right words, and to make a link between the commemoration and the current crisis that the people are going through.
Yes.
And I wanted to ask Denis a question, is that today Putin also made a speech, a commemorative speech of the Victory Day.
Oh, yeah? And did he address the nation?
He addressed the
Yes.
nation, and
Okay, which is quite peculiar. Yeah, it's quite special then.
a
Yes.
commemorative speech. Do you find that he was able, in the same way as the Queen, did he use this speech to commemorate, but also to convey a sense of unity to the Russian people going through the current crisis, in addition to the past crisis of World War II?
Well, I think yes. I think, as I say, majority of people, despite what the Western media, I think, narrative of the Western media is, I think, majority of Russians, they, especially elder ones and the ones above the middle age, I think they also value President Putin. I think maybe not in the same way, but very close in the way that British people value their Queen. And I think, yeah, because as I say, I was in the kitchen today, yeah, cooking, and there was a radio, and in every news segment, they broadcast Putin's speech. Yeah, so to me, he sounded very sincere and very caring about the society, and I think the message was very reminiscent of the Queen's. So in essence, he was trying to say that yes, now times are tough, but there have been much more difficult times, and we will get over this one as well. Yeah, yeah. So basically, yeah. So I think I just trying to find if I can
In
read something
quotes.
of that. Yeah, but yeah. So basically, yes, it was mainly a tribute to the warriors, and yeah. And by the way, in Russia, it's not just the Second World War. In Russia, Second World War is known as the Great Patriotic War. And of course, it ended 75 years ago. So today was a very special event. Yeah. So yeah. So basically, yeah. But he wasn't relating anything directly to this current pandemic. It was mainly focused on the Second World War itself. But he made a resolution, he made a promise to the public that, although we're not having a full celebration right now, but we'll certainly celebrate it at a later stage. Yeah, so I think it was a very important event, because for some people, it's a sacred event. And for instance, in Belarus, which is a small neighboring country of Russia, which was also part of the Soviet Union, President Lukashenko, he decided not to cancel this parade because he said it's unacceptable for people to cancel it for the first time in 75 years. So they kept it fully fledged celebration of this event. Yeah. Yeah, so I think, yeah. So for me, yes, it was a
Yeah,
it was a
so
just address to the speech. Yeah. Yes, yeah.
So yes, I would just ask, how do you find historical memory as as an important way to unite the country along a common shared history? And do you think that uh, would would these events, the Queen's speech and Putin's speech and the commemoration, would it have been any different if there wasn't the COVID crisis? And I'm not just talking about the logistics of the celebrations, but in terms of um, whether it's able to be, it's the way to bring the country together.
If it wasn't, I think if it wasn't the COVID-19, but there would have been still the parade. So I think parade, it's always a date when, you know, it brings the country together. Yes, yeah, because I think, yes, people march, people go all over the country, they go to the parks, they go to the gatherings, you know, they're veterans on the streets, people salute veterans. Yeah, their patriotic songs outside. Of course, Putin's speech is being replayed in the news all during the whole day. Yeah, so I think it's basically, yes, I think regardless of this pandemic, I think this event would have united basically. I wouldn't say it would have united because I think generally, I think Russians are more or less unified. But I think yes, it would have been basically just sort of just reminded them of the unity that we have. Yeah, yeah. But I wouldn't say it would have been much different. Yeah,
And
yeah. And the final thing I would say, you know, because I think in the case of Russia and the United Kingdom, I think if we talk in the business categorical terms or country in terms of country-wise, every country or business has their competitive advantage. So I would say for the UK, the competitive advantage is they have this royal system. The Queen is the main competitive advantage in terms of how to project its image abroad and how to unite people together. Whereas for Russia, I think victory in the Second World War is the one of the most important competitive advantage that can unite people inside the country and can project its positive image abroad as well.
okay, so that's a interesting comparison. That in Russia, you have a unity around this historical commemoration, whether there's the COVID crisis or not, whether there's a celebration or not.
And I would say, sorry to interrupt you, and I would say this, even dates are particularly important. Like 5 years ago, it was 70 years. Now it's 75 years. So I would say next year it wouldn't be as significant. So next one will be 80 years, which will be super unity, basically event. Yeah, yeah. So I think it's also plays a role. This.
Yeah, I think it's like the right time at the time we need it the most, perhaps, because yeah, as you said, 75, and it coincides with this crisis, which is also like, you know, it's not happening very often at all. So
Yes.
I think that there's a sense of a strong link there that that each country can use to its own advantage to propel forward.
And so, Johan, do you find that the UK will emerge more united as going out of the crisis, or will there be strong divisions? Earlier, you were talking about how there are different groups in the economy that are experiencing this much in a very different way, one from another. You mentioned the brick and mortar shops for whom this is a very dire situation. But do you find that in a general sense, in a country like the UK, that do you see the signs right now of whether it'll come out as a more united country or more internally divided?
Yeah, I think it's a difficult question. I mean, I'm just gonna offer my opinion based on what I've been listening and observing. So I think I'm optimist. I have optimism that it will bring people together. But as in England, it's quite diversified, especially in London. We have different cultures, and then we have this situation where, as I mentioned before, we have the people that are pro lockdown and they're really like complying with the government, and then you have other people that understand that the lockdown has been necessary, to stop, to delay, to spread out the curve, like they say. But they're also now more keen to get back to their daily activities, to their back to normality as such, go back to job, and because they recognize the economy it needs to be reactivated. So I think there could be some potential confrontation there, where some people believe that the lockdown should continue, and other people are perhaps already in the mode of, okay, it's
We've had enough.
getting better, and natural, and then naturally you're just getting into the flow of things again. And I think there could be some resistance that the people that are naturally flowing into the daily activities can experience, without really planning for it. Just I'm walking in the street and then somebody will shout at me or something, like because that is normally the way that unfortunately I see the behavior between strangers. If you're in a supermarket, it just takes you doing something that is slightly out of the expectation of the other person, and then that person very easily will open their mouth to say something negative, to say, oh, hey, what are you doing? There's not that approach of being nice and just, okay, acknowledge the other person, hope you're having a good day. But on the other hand, I think for the people that are more appreciative of this of this lockdown, because it offers us the opportunity to really to connect with ourselves and enjoy all the things around us that we normally take for granted because of our busy lifestyle. Then I think there will be that wave of people that will be bring unity as well. So I think there's a
Yes.
balance at the end of the day, is how I see it, and I'm not sure if it will be so evident that we're walking into a more united society as a whole. I'm not sure if it will be that evident, but I see these two streams.
Okay, so on the one hand, there are people that are a bit more skeptical and suspicious, but on the other hand, there are people that try to see the silver lining in the situation. So with that, I think these are interesting comparisons between the two countries. I liked your point, Denis, where you were saying that that the focal point of national unity in the UK is the monarchy, while in Russia it's the Victory Day commemoration. So I thought that was an interesting point. And I wanted to ask before we conclude whether there's any last thoughts that you would like to share. Go ahead.
Yes. Well, first of all, I think Johan could expand on this in his conclusion, but Johan mentioned a very important point that it's a chance for us to connect with one another, so we can enjoy things more that otherwise we used to take for granted. So I think it's a very important message or tips for people who feel depressed, who feel sort of down during this pandemic. So these just two things. We should connect with each other and enjoy things more that we didn't enjoy before the pandemic. Yes, but from my side, I would say another thought that when you asked question about whether this pandemic will leave people not just in the UK or Russia, but in the whole world more divided or united, I think yes, it will be united, but I don't think it's fair to see it from the political lenses, because I've read many articles in the reputed newspapers about that the crisis will test the authority, it will test the power of Boris Johnson, Trump, Putin, I don't think it's much to do with politics. I think it's the crisis. And, because we have to understand that the presidents or the prime ministers, they're pretty much not just the presidents, but they're the managers, they're the chief executives of their states. So they are now playing the roles of the crisis manager. And I think it depends on which strategy they have adopted. Because, for instance, like Boris Johnson, he is like the chairman, but also the active manager of this crisis, whereas Trump and Putin, they have delegated the majority of the powers to the states and to the federal to the autonomous regions to deal themselves with this crisis. Yes, and many people have criticized Putin for that. That he has delegated the responsibility. So basically, he made governors as the scapegoats. But I don't agree with this notion, because I think there's a strategy that he chose. And I think it's not to do with power or political advantage. Uh, yes, for the leader who deals with this crisis, I think is the problem that they are faced with, and they just have to deal with this problem. And from the conversations that I try to have with my Russian friends, colleagues, and acquaintances, they're very much, all of them actually, I would say, very apolitical, and they only see it as the crisis in itself. There's a pandemic, there's a virus, but they don't make any link between the crisis and the president. Yeah, we would only find these discussions amongst people who are professionals, who are either opposition politicians or who are political analysts. Yeah, it's their livelihood. They have to make these comparisons because that's their job. Yeah, but I wouldn't say many people are concerned about Putin's ratings or his personal political capital or of how he manages this crisis. Yeah.
Yeah, so I tend to agree with that. People are, if anything, more trying to look after themselves, and yeah, the crisis is what they see in the news as well as a first priority. And I think it's a relationship of the human emotions and how we are responding to a crisis. So I think that's taking priority over any political agenda, any elections. But from the political side, it might be a completely different agenda, because they may be trying to, and they are trying definitely the biggest effort to say to the nation what people want to hear, but really from their point of view, they might be thinking like Trump. They might be thinking about November,
Yes.
And he
election.
is, and there may be some actions relating to the crisis, like the checks that he's giving out to people, that is coming
money.
in handy. Yeah, helicopter is coming in handy to the people because it sorts out, some of the issues for those unemployed, particularly. But it might play into his hands when the elections come, and yeah, obviously there's a bit of that as well. That's something that is a strategy that I think Mexico will adopt as well, and is playing into that president's hands as well because of his socialism strategy. He probably, this crisis is going to play into his hands as well.
Yes.
The Mexican government.
Yes, Johan, and I was also, yes, when I was making my thesis about, it's nothing to do with power or politics, I was saying from the public's point of view, from the people's point of view, but of course from the politician's point of view, it's an opportunity to demonstrate himself that he's a good president, he's a good prime minister in order to increase his chances to be re-elected. It's actually very relevant to the Boris Johnson, who is eligible to be nominated to be the prime minister for the next term. Trump is having elections in November, and Putin is having a referendum on the constitution, which will allow him to serve 2 more consecutive terms. Okay. So of course, for them, this crisis is an opportunity to show that they are the best equipped, to lead the country during the tough times. And also, I read in the news that Trump canceled his daily press conferences because some of his political advisors suggested that because he's so combative with the media, it has negatively affected his ratings. Yeah, so because of that, he decided to cancel this press conference. So I think political aspect of this pandemic is mostly relevant to politicians themselves, but I think public don't care much about this.
No. So can we say then, yeah, because I think we've, you know, I've heard in our last few minutes a lot the crisis and opportunity. I think that's very true, isn't it? At all levels,
Yes, all
crisis
levels,
represents
exactly. Yes,
opportunity or
for everyone.
challenges for
Yes,
everyone. Yeah, to overcome, to come out, you know, as a different person with a different goals and agenda. And yeah, I think
mindset, I would say,
that's
even, you know, thinking.
basic. Yeah.
My thinking is
Yeah,
changing
something
actually.
changes.
Yeah,
Yeah,
definitely.
yeah. I mean, crisis equals opportunity, but also it can and almost inevitably will instigate a change. You know, a change
I think
in
it's how you embrace it,
whatever it
because
is.
yeah, because you can embrace it negatively or you can embrace it positively. And I think it's all up to you
Mm.
in your mindset, you know. Yeah, yeah. So I think it's
And
yeah,
this is the thing, you know, a lot of people. I was talking to
yeah,
someone, you know, some conversations, third persons. They were saying that they're contacting a lot of people, and people have this way of, okay, I hope you're surviving, you know, through this lockdown, you know. So they tend to focus it in that negative way, or to give it a
surviving. Yeah,
negative
surviving is a
tone,
negative in itself.
like
Surviving.
surviving, or it just comes down to that point where, yeah, there is a crisis, and we change our into survival mode. Because at the end of the day, you know, I think in our brain there's something called the amygdala, which might be, you know, it is triggered, and we just look to survive, basically. You know,
Yeah,
it's like
but
if a tiger is there and you know, then you just you switch to survival mode, and you just want to escape and run away from him. So that's
yeah,
sort of similar reaction in our brain, I think, is inevitably
yeah. Yes, I think we should basically, yeah,
triggered.
try to strive, not to survive. I think the opposite word is to
Yeah,
strive. You know, we should basically do our best during this
but
crisis. But
yeah,
yeah, but
so we're humans, so we have
yeah,
that layer in our brain that allows us to think, you know, with more
yes.
rational,
Yeah,
I
Augustine,
yeah,
but I wanted to ask
choose
you,
it
Augustine,
option.
because you're
depends.
expatriate, even in Moscow. So briefly, how are you finding it? Because we haven't asked you much, and you haven't told us much. Maybe you're suffering, you're surviving, or you're striving. So tell us a couple of words about yourself.
Yeah, about your
Because
experience, yes.
yes, as a
Well,
because you're
I
in a
would say
unique position.
there's a very uh, big difference between people who can continue to work in this context, so through teleworking, the knowledge economy, etc.,
Yes,
and people who all of a sudden their work, their livelihoods was totally affected for the negative, and there's nothing they can do about it.
Mm.
So I think that is a fundamental difference. There are people who can continue and get on, but for people it's far more difficult. And I think that this will be a big dividing point between when we get out of this crisis. As for me, I'm in a very lucky position to be able to be part of those people who can work through televideo, emails, calls, can continue to work like this. And you know, the thing is that my work is international, so I hop on calls in Russia, in France, sometimes even in the US.
Mm.
So, and I'm here in this apartment, which in reality could be anywhere. So I ask myself, like, why be here when I could be somewhere else? And can teleworking be like a permanent feature of kind of the knowledge
Yeah,
economy kind of work?
yeah,
If
and then
communicating
yeah,
with from all over the world. I mean, we're communicating now, but we might as well be anywhere
yes.
through this
and
tool.
have the same result. Yeah, and feel the same way, or yeah,
If not better.
if
Yes.
not better. Yeah, 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 exactly, exactly. But you know, I was gonna say on that point that you touched, I've been seeing a lot of people that work for big corporations in London, for example, and they've been told that, you know, for a few more months they're gonna, you know, stay at home kind of thing. So it just poses a question, you know, what is gonna happen with all this office space? Potentially will be sacrificed, and it will benefit many companies in terms of fixed costs. So I'm just thinking of what will happen with all these buildings that already exist, where companies won't have the people coming into the office anymore because they've been told that you know, if you stay at home, it's fine with me as well. It's fine with the company. And so yeah, I think it will be an interesting future for the construction and the existing buildings, the renting,
Yeah.
that sort of thing, you know,
Yeah, it's
real
revolution.
estate
It's revolution happening in
revolution.
front of our eyes. I
Yeah,
think,
yeah, yeah.
yeah,
It's developing. It's a developing story. Yeah.
yes, developing story, exactly. Yeah,
On the one
yeah,
hand,
yeah.
you don't need to you don't need to necessarily, in the knowledge economy, you don't necessarily need to be in one office. So as Johan was saying, it frees up space mostly in major cities, and it makes it possible to work anywhere in the country or the world through these tools. But at the same time, isn't it also important to be able to work face to face in the physical presence of people? And isn't that what makes cities important, and the spaces we occupy, including the office buildings we occupy, important for the work?
Yes, I
So
think it's
those are
important.
interesting questions.
Yes, I think it's important that you say, so basically you're saying, isn't it important that physical contact is important? So that's why office are important, yeah? Is that what you are saying? Yeah, I think, is that what you're
Yes, and I think that through this teleworking at the moment,
Yes,
we work on the assumption that things will get back to normal.
yes,
And we're able to work now in the way that we do because we've had a history of working together. And we assume that later we will resume that way of
yes,
working. And we see this as a temporary situation.
yes.
But maybe, as Johan was saying, it might be more of a long-term situation where all of a sudden downtown office buildings will no longer be necessary.
Yeah.
So it'll be interesting to see how it develops.
I think actually, if I will take a liberty to make a prediction, I think it will change, of course, but I don't think it will change 100%. I think it will be incremental change. So I think maybe some companies will decide not to occupy office spaces, but I don't think it will be applicable universally to each and every company. Yeah, so I think
No,
it
for
will.
manufacturing, it doesn't apply.
Yes, yes. No, but I mean, in terms of if any company has enough finances, they have good liquidity, I think they will still resort to the offices. But those companies who are a bit tight with the budget, I think they will encourage employees to work from home, and that may become a permanent measure. Yes,
Yeah.
yeah, but I also wanted to emphasize that, people still understand, the majority of people, that face-to-face contacts are very important in the world of business. And in fact, I was reading an article in the Times newspaper in the beginning of this week in the context of UK-EU negotiations. Because as we know, David Frost, he's the chief negotiator of the British government, and he was having a teleconference with his EU counterparts. And this was an official negotiation. And there was an observation in the article that David Frost felt that teleconference video negotiations limits his power to influence his EU counterparts, because most of the breakthrough deals are done informally. So, for instance, if they were communicating face to face, he would invite him to have a drink in the bar. So they would have settled some contentious, difficult issues over the bar and over the drink, etc. So what he had decided, David Frost, is to have a video informal drink. I don't know how they're going to do it, but they will have a separate informal video conference where they can settle difficult parts.
Yep.
So I found that very
With a
interesting
drink.
as well. Yes, it's an argument for critics who would say, it lacks informal communication, but we'll see that, informal communication is also possible during this video conference.
Yeah, yeah, and it's important, yeah, as you said, for serious, because it just, I don't know, it provides a different setting, and yeah, it's proven to work in a physical world. So yeah, how is that gonna, can it work also in the virtual space?
Yes. Perhaps in the world of business development, in some countries, the personal relationships and building the personal relationship is a very important part of business development.
Yes.
So it's going to be hard to imagine an alternative way that could take place. But at the same time, you have lots of internal back office work inside companies and organizations, which don't necessarily need to be done in an office. Accounting work, legal work.
Yes.
admin. Yeah,
But you
yeah. For
know,
example, my wife, she's an accountant, and she has to go physically to her office. And yeah, absolutely, that's something she can do from home, no problem. And she has worked from home in the past successfully. But yeah, then that's that. Sometimes maybe the person can miss going to the office because here they talk about the office banter. People miss it, and I think yeah, in my workplace, the few people that are going, they say that they feel better coming to the office because you talk to other people, and I think it
Exactly,
provides a
yes. You feel more
well-being,
disciplined.
mental well-being.
Yeah,
Yeah, more discipline. And if you have kids as well, this
yes.
came from a person that, I mean, I have a kid, but she's not with me at the moment. But this person that said exactly that, she has a kid at home. She cannot work in the same way at home, and for some people, going to work is like a break. The yeah, from being at home, it's just like another space to go to balance the life that they have. And it works well.
Yes, and I think also in the
Yeah.
workplace, it's like indirect pressure that you're faced with, in order to perform, in order to deliver, because other people are watching you. So every time, you have to put serious face. You're not going to do like things like with chores. You're not going to be distracted with house-related things. Yeah. So I think overall, I think it's actually more productive to work in the office as opposed
You
to
got that
home, I think.
pressure, that healthy pressure. Yeah, I mean, it can
Healthy
also
pressure.
keep.
Yes, not
Yeah,
toxic
healthy,
pressure, but healthy pressure. It's a big difference. Yeah,
healthy pressure.
team
Yeah, that
spirit.
yes, it can be managed. It can also get out of hand or not,
Yes,
because you can underperform or perform better or perform okay. That's why you have one-to-ones and so on. But yeah, I tend to agree with you, Dennis, that
yes,
yeah, if you're in the office space, I think it sort of frames your mind to focus on work with less
yes,
distractions potentially you can be faced at home with. And yeah, I mean, every individual will deal with it in a different way
yes.
also. So,
And also think office or working in office provides you an opportunity to clear out any things that you're not sure about. So you have other departments, so you can clear out very quickly. You can go to them. You can ask them. I have this problem. Can you help me out? I'm not sure how to do this. Or you have access to your boss, face-to-face access. So I think actually it's more
yeah.
efficient. If you work in that environment.
so maybe at the end of this crisis, we realize that both teleworking and working in an office are useful and productive in their own ways. So maybe we might see something of a more flexible arrangement in the knowledge economy. Maybe we work certain days in the office, and then, but there's more flexibility to work certain days from home or anywhere else. Maybe that might be more acceptable.
Yes, I think it's more acceptable, but I think it's this pandemic is like a really accelerate. It's a push factor for people to adapt much more rapidly, much quicker, to the new reality. I think because IT technology is developing at a very
Yeah,
fast rate. Yeah, yeah. So I think this crisis has pushed people to become up to date with all the latest softwares, with yeah, how to work at home, how to work remotely. Yeah, so I
So
think basically, yeah,
you're using the word adaptation. Maybe we can also say that this crisis is accelerating
yes,
uh, trends that have already been developing, just like not only teleworking, but just the IT sector in general, and what tech and the way that tech changes our lives. That you have 10 years of change within 10 months.
yes, yes,
no, yeah. Yeah, I think I was watching somebody, the CEO of ARK Investment Management, or that company, was interviewed in Bloomberg the other day, and she was saying that yeah, they're seeing basically the tech companies, the big ones, as Facebook, Google, they are advancing faster. Some of the tech is advancing faster than before the pandemic. So yeah, and yeah, I mean, clearly for people that are working from home, companies like Zoom, it provides a great um, platform really to build upon, because yeah, the people are needing this are relying potentially more on these IT solutions.
By the way, I remembered I also read an article, I believe, in the Financial Times, because Johan mentioned a point, what will happen to these empty office spaces, but what is happening now to the empty hotels throughout the world,
Wow, like
so I think,
Hilton.
yes, Hilton, yes, and I'm going to mention Hilton as well, because you can also say, they're empty now, it's how you embrace the crisis. So what they did in Hilton in the US, many of the US professionals, they couldn't work from home effectively. So what hotel decided is that they rented hotel rooms as an office space, and they
Wow,
communicated it very effectively to the business community, and those professionals who could afford, to rent those office suites or rooms, they paid to the hotels, and they had basically change
revenue. Yeah.
change the interior of the hotel to make it more office-like environment. So many,
No way. They
I think
adapted.
LA businessmen used to work in the hotels, but they used it only for office work. Yeah, so I think it's also an example how hotels are being agile, in order to get some revenue coming in. Yeah, so I think
Yeah,
it's all about mindset, and it works both ways. I think if you have a really good idea, then I think other people are going to buy this product, that you are selling, provided it will be useful for them.
yeah, in this current climate. Okay, so how are we doing with time?
I think, I think it's still recording, but I think, we are over an hour now. Yeah, so I think it was a good uh, conversation. Yeah, so maybe next time, I think, for our viewers, if someone's going to watch, I think because we touched, I'm not making a conclusion. I leave Augustine to conclude our conversation. But I think my suggestion is that it would be nice if we talk about in detail live post lockdown, because we talked about how we're going to work, but it's not just about work. I think it will affect comprehensively all aspects of our lives. So perhaps next time we can touch in more detail, life in all of its facets after the lockdown or in the midst of this crisis, because crisis is still there. So we can talk how people are going to change the way we live. Yeah, that's my takeaway from this point. But I'll leave it to Augustine to make his conclusion.
Yes, so we've had a wide-ranging discussion looking at our own personal experiences and those around us going through the crisis. We talked about some of the symbolic commemorations and compared them between the UK and Russia, how these commemorations are proceeding in this context that we're in. Uh, we also talked a little bit about teleworking and how this changes the culture of work, um, what it can contribute, what it lacks. And yes, for the next meeting, we can dive more into some details about how we think our lives will change getting out of this pandemic from a comprehensive view. I think the international order is changing very fast, so it's interesting to see whether these big structural changes can have an impact on our day-to-day lives. So that would be interesting to talk about this. So thank you for listening, and stay safe, and goodbye.
Thank you very much. Thank you. Bye. Bye, everyone.
Thank
Thank
you.
you. Thank you.
Yeah.
Bye.
Right.